My name is Rob Mattern with Mattern, and I am honored to be joined by Chris Meister, Information Governance Manager for Goldberg Kohn in Chicago. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, I just want to let you know that your Bears are killing me, my football
Yeah.
poll every week. Okay.
Well, they're killing us too.
Okay. And also too, I just want to, before we go any further, I just want to you to show everyone your desk. Now, other than the three sheets on the wall marking where those three pictures are supposed to go, you'll notice that there is no paper on Chris's desk. This is the desk of an information governance manager, and where we all hope to get to someday. Notice I'm not sharing my desk. Before we get started, just some simple housekeeping rules. Everyone's muted. Unmute yourself to speak. Ask questions and participate. When you do, please make sure you introduce yourself. Please feel free to submit questions through chat. We're going to be keeping an eye on that and seeing, trying to work the questions in throughout. If not, we'll follow up afterwards with the answers. Be sure to keep yourself on mute if you're not participating or asking a question to avoid background noise. And everyone should have gotten a Starbucks gift card. So hopefully you have a cup of hot coffee sitting on your desk and you're ready to start, and we'll get rolling. So Chris, before we start talking about the areas that we're going to touch upon today, how long have you been in your with the firm?
I just made 30 years with Goldberg Kohn in September.
30 years. So you started like when you were like 12?
Something like that.
Okay. And what role, as I already mentioned, you're the IG manager as of right now, but where else, talk to everyone about the other roles you've played in your the firm.
Sure. I started out as a legal secretary here. And that was a long time ago when we were still in DOS days. And during the course of helping the firm to transition from DOS to Windows, WordPerfect to Word, started doing some training. Our IT department was very small. We had half a person, and just sort of grew into that. When the training person left, they offered me that position. I also took over doing the phones. So I was the training and telecom manager for about 20 something years, doing a lot of other things, growing into with the IT department, helping us to transition any software upgrades, working with the team on that, new products, computer swap bots, all that kind of stuff. And then last year, and started working with the records team probably about 6 years ago on some various initiatives they had. And then about a little over a year ago, information governance became a department, and I transitioned to the role of the information governance manager.
Which was one of our recommendations in our IG report. So, so we're somewhat responsible for you sitting there overseeing the IG department. So, okay, just some background before we start getting into the different areas. Mattern was hired by Goldberg Kohn to really focus on three areas: create the IG policy, along with retention schedules, and assist with the implementation, negotiate the offsite record storage contract, and negotiate and oversee the implementation of and monitor the scanning operation. And we'll talk about how that dovetails with everything that the other initiatives that we had in progress. So we're going to start off with offsite record storage. A little bit unusual situation here that the firm was with a vendor that, Chris, why don't you give some background there, that went through a lot of changes?
Yeah, a long time ago, we were with one vendor that we were unhappy with for whatever reason, and we transitioned to a different vendor, but they were a smaller local company. They got bought by another company, which got bought by another company, which got bought by our current vendor.
Okay. But you were happy.
Yes.
Yeah. So typically we recommend a competitive situation, but the firm was very happy. So we just did a really, what we call as a closed RFP negotiation with this vendor, with the idea that we wanted to situate the contract to really allow the firm to destroy cost effectively and protect costs over the next 7 to 10 years, and we end up signing a 10-year contract. And so we want to we focus on escalations, get the removal of the minimum that a lot of times handcuffs a firm from destroying, and really focus on driving down destruction costs, which we're very successful at that. So at the time, about 60% of your files in there were over greater than 10 years old at the time when we did that contract.
Yep.
Okay. So we get the contract in place, and we want to start looking at destroying files that are old. Okay. How did that go?
Well, we've identified things that are eligible for destruction, actually quite a number of boxes. Only because we were able to actually put a records retention schedule in place, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we have to look at those boxes in light of things. We now are doing a better job of tracking those types of requirements in outside counsel guidelines. So we need to make sure that if any clients require notification, or if they want a certificate of destruction, that we can make sure that we provide that for them. The other thing we ran into is, as we would purge our records center to send files offsite, which is what we all did, right? I mean, years ago, we had lots and lots of paper, and our files would fill up. And so we would just figure out what had been touched, like let's say maybe in more than 6 months, no one had looked at it, or more than a year. And we would pull that stuff off the shelves, box it off, and send it offsite. Storage was cheap. No one was really worried about it. But like a lot of other businesses, we didn't necessarily look at the file as a whole. It was just what part of the files were inactive. So a box can have a mix of client and matters. So sometimes that's a problem, right? So we had to identify boxes where the entire content is eligible for destruction. It's not necessarily the entire client matter file. So we're just doing our best to work towards, as we move forward and destroy more, that we will sort of do that catch up. But we need to make sure that everything in the box is eligible for destruction, because nobody wants to go lift the lid. There's just not enough time in the day for us to do a project like that with as many boxes we have offsite.
Okay, so I just want to remind everyone that the title of this coffee break is Going Digital, Success and Setbacks. So we're going to give you both sides of the issues and things that every one of you is probably encountering with your own, records, implementation of IG policies, retention, and trying to destroy records offsite. So we're going to, and since this is our last coffee break of the year, we want to get down in the trenches and give you some, practical how-to advice on how to handle some of these issues. So that what you're describing is not rare. Almost every firm has it. Mix of different matters in the boxes with different retention. Some firms are electing to flip the lid. Other firms are not, and playing the game you're playing, which is really the game plan is over the next 7 years, those files will hit retention.
Our goal is, by the end of our contract, which is about 7 years, we would like to no longer be in business with our offsite storage vendor. Everything that we can possibly destroy, we will have destroyed. And what's left that we have to retain, our goal is to have what records are currently stored in our record center. Again, a lot of that will be destroyed, so that there is space on site for everything that the firm would need to retain physically, we would retain on site.
Okay, yeah, your contract's up in May of 2032. So approximately 7.5 years left or so. Okay. And we signed a 10-year contract. And we always like to say that when we do a project, offsite record storage contract, this will be the last contract you'll ever have to sign, which theoretically, in your case, it should be. Okay. Open. Okay. Let's talk about the fire.
Okay, so 3 years ago already? Wow, 2.5, 3 years ago, they had a fire in one of their warehouses. We did have a small percentage of our files that were stored there. We actually didn't even know that they were storing our files in multiple locations. They tracked that. We didn't track that on our end, just because it wasn't really obvious from any of the information we got from them. So we had to rely on them to give us an inventory of what was stored in the location that was destroyed. And it was a complete loss. I mean, that fire smoldered for months. What was interesting is we had to, of course, have a group of people at the firm. We had lawyers, paralegals, legal assistants, all of us, records and IG, some people from IT. We had to look through the inventory of everything was destroyed and decide, do we need to notify the clients? Do we need to figure out, do we need to replicate any of that? Is it important to recreate that back in paper? And with very few exceptions, we found that we did not need to recreate the paper because it was either easily available, either we already had it electronically in our DMS, or it was available from a website, or, like from a court website, or like a official government website, and other ways of things that have been filed. What we did find, though, was we weren't always super great about closing matters in a timely fashion. So a lot of things where they could have been closed or where retention could have run already, they then went forward ahead with that and started closing a bunch of those matters. But it also sort of gave us some ammunition later on when we said we really want to start destroying the files off site, because if you already know that this stuff, you didn't need to reproduce it, there's all this other stuff that's even older. Let's just get rid of it. And it was not as big of a push as I thought it was going to be. The lawyers were actually pretty okay with it, which really was actually a surprise to me. I thought that there was sort of be like, oh no, we got to check everything. We're also starting, though, with everything where the matters have been closed for 20 years or more, or we even have instances where the files are so old that the matters don't even exist in our accounting system anymore. And so that stuff is so old, that's low enough hanging fruit that they're like, oh yeah, for sure, that's easy. But the goal is to move forward every year, a year closer, so that by the time we get to the end of our contract, we again will be at that 10-year, which is our big bucket.
Okay. But you said you were surprised that the attorneys didn't push back on this, the
Mhm.
files lost in fire. What other surprises that came out because of this?
The fact that they realized that we didn't really have had to have kept the paper at all in the first place
Okay.
was a nice surprise. Um,
Well, you
those
made a comment. You didn't even know you had records in this warehouse.
we didn't. We did not know that they stored stuff across multiple locations for us. That was their call of what they stored where. I'm sure if we had looked close enough at their system, it probably would have indicated somewhere, but it just never occurred to us because we were just used to everything being in a central location.
Yeah, and that's we talked about this a little bit when we were prepping here. A lot of people are under the mistaken notion that they could go down to their offsite record storage service provider, walk in, and be showing a shelf and say, "Oh, these are all your boxes here."
Yeah, it's
Nothing
not
could
like
be
self-storage.
not like self-storage. Your boxes may not will probably not be in the same location. Will definitely not be grouped together in the warehouse. That you're scattered all over the place.
Yeah.
And again, not even the same state in some
It
situations.
would be,
Especially, yeah, it would be rare. Okay. Um, but also too, maybe other you talked about getting charged when you permanently withdraw a box or when you recall a box and being surprised that you still have to pay for that
yes.
storage.
So if you pull a box from your offsite storage vendor back to your home base, um, you're still paying for that space. If you have the box here for a year, you pay for a year worth of storage for that space. So if you do pull boxes from offsite, you want to sort of think about that. We decided in I think 2019 is the last year we sent boxes offsite. I could be a little off on that. And so any boxes we've pulled since then, we've simply permed out right away because we don't intend to ever send any more boxes offsite, and we will then just manage them here.
Now, do you scan them when you bring them back, or do you just
We
sometimes keep
have
the paper contents?
So what we did is the boxes we have on site, we pulled all of the items that had not passed retention, and we had those scanned as part of our scanning project. The rest are still sitting in the boxes until we get to the point of actually pulling the switch on the destruction of those.
Okay. So you bring it back, you scan what's still active, other stuff, you don't worry about. Okay. One other thing he said, and I always ask, like, what's the best piece of advice you can give someone who's managing an offsite record storage contract? And you mentioned watching the little fees.
Yes, there's a lot of hidden fees. They charge you to pull a bot, they charge you to get the box and put it on the truck. They charge you to get the truck here. Then they are charging you for the space while you're not using it. Then when you send it back, they charge you to pick it up and send it back, but then they also charge you to put it back on the shelf. So there's little things that add up quickly. And depending on the size of your firm, I know when we do pull boxes, well, not so much when we pull them, but when we used to send them back, we didn't just send them back willy-nilly as if we had 3 boxes. We would wait to send them back until we had enough boxes that the trip was worth it, right? Because it's one charge for the box, but it's another charge for the trip itself.
Exactly.
So you might as well send as many boxes as you can in one trip because that cost is flat.
Yeah. And again, we negotiated a contract. We tried to get language in a lot of our contracts that they can't introduce any new fees on the Schedule A. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. This is a closed RFP, which makes it, we like open competitive situations. That's where we get the best terms and pricing. But sometimes, that's not what the firm wants. So we try to do the best we can. But you're right. You got to be careful that, one vendor out there was charging for vaccinated drivers, charging extra for that. So
Yeah,
you,
some of
you
them
got to
do
be,
like the fuel surcharge if gas prices go up.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. But they never come down.
No, it never comes back.
Yeah, it never comes down. So, okay, anything else you want to add on the offsite records storage situation?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the IG policy. Okay. That was part of our engagement, and Nathan Curtis, one of our consultants, created the policy. And again, we want to address both paper and electronic in the policy and create a standardized platform with retention schedules for the firm to follow. Chris, your thoughts on having a IG policy / retention schedule?
So the most important thing from my perspective is the schedule itself, because the schedule is basically your foundation. You can't have a policy around something where you have no time frame, no limits, right? So figuring out what that is was key number one. We took a sort of a big bucket approach. We don't have hundreds of areas of law that we practice, but we did want to include areas of law that we don't typically practice because we do pro bono work sometimes for some of our clients or various people, so you never really know. But instead of figuring out, well, this practice of law needs 7 years, and this needs 9, and this needs 5, and this, most of them were around 10, so we just created that big bucket for 10. Anything that's an exception to that, things like estate planning, family law, anything you do like with naturalization, that kind of stuff, those things that by law you have to keep longer, those are carved out. Again, we don't have that much of that. So we sort of did that big bucket approach, and that made it much easier. Once you actually have a schedule, you can then create a policy, and policies should be very high level, and they should be short. So a really good policy, especially for something like data retention or information governance as a whole, if you can keep it like 3 pages or less, because all of the details within that are things that will happen as part of the processes and procedures. So processes and procedures don't get detailed in the policy itself, but as separate documentation, because those are the things that are going to change on a regular basis. They may even change every single day when you start working through the procedures. And the good thing is, once you have a high level policy, you can build the procedures in such a way that simply following the procedure will put you in compliance with the policy. That's the goal. So people don't have to actually know the policy itself as long as they know what the procedure is, because then they'll be in compliance.
Okay, give me an example of that for everyone.
So for instance, if your policy says that email should be treated the same as business correspondence and placed in the official repository of record, your procedure then is you create folders in your inbox, you move your emails there, you link them to the DMS, and they get filed. And so by telling them that's the process, then if they follow that process, they're in compliance with the policy.
Okay, excellent example. Okay, as I already mentioned, that part of our recommendations was create an IG specialist role. Okay, which yours truly there, you did. Okay, tell us, do you like it? Was it what you imagined?
I do, yeah, it is. I still dabble in some other things, so I have kind of a variety, but it is, yeah. In a nutshell, when people ask me what my job is now, because people outside of records or IG they don't really know what it means. I just tell them my entire work life now revolves around trying to get lawyers to get rid of their stuff.
That's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge.
Okay. A conversation yesterday, you mentioned about the engagement letter, how the firm has had one in place for a long time.
Yes, we've
but
had, yeah, so we do engagement letters about, I don't remember the exact date, but it's about 20-ish years ago. We actually put some relatively vague language in our engagement letters that simply discuss that after the close of a matter, any of the records that we have would just be handed over to our records manager and managed in compliance with our record keeping policies. So vague enough to not get us stuck in saying, oh, we're going to keep it for so long, but also specific enough to cover us that they already know that our plan is at some point we'll get rid of stuff.
Okay, what else? In regards to the IG policy and retention schedules, any advice you could give people?
So the retention schedule again is the most important thing to me because that's what gives you the ability to then use that criteria to figure out what you have. Because once you know what you have that's eligible for destruction, that can help you to figure out how to destroy it or what to keep. Because if you don't have that, you're like, you don't even know where to start, right? And then don't try to tackle everything at one time. It's a big undertaking. There's a lot of things that fall under the IG umbrella. I'm not worried at this point about what's going on with accounting or HR. Like that'll come down the road. That does fall under IG as well, what records they keep. But at a law firm, 95%, give or take, of the records you have all revolve around the client file or the client matter file. And so that's an easy focus. And the other thing is to not let perfection get in the way of progress. You're going to want to say, oh, well, we can't do this until we have this in place. Oh, and if we want to do that, we have to have this other thing in place. Sometimes you just have to start somewhere. And then as you work through, we wanted to figure out how to destroy these 2,000 boxes of information. And what do we do then? Is there also electronic stuff? Okay, how do we handle that? And so when you start with the content and you work through it, that helps you to develop your procedures, which can actually help you to tweak your policies as well. So sometimes starting backwards, right? You think, oh, I need the policy first when you really don't. You need to figure out how do I do it? And then what do I need to back up how I do it?
Perfection in the way of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Great line. Okay.
That's Nathan's line.
Nathan's line. I was going to say that. Give him a shout out for that. But when I sit in a IG presentation or we're having the initial conversation with people, Nathan must say that line 10 times. And it couldn't be a better summary or thought to have in your mind when you're trying to implement something as big as information governance. Okay, so we talked about your offsite situation. We talked about your retention schedules, IG policy. And again, it's an overwhelming endeavor. But again, you got to do what you have to do. And Chris, you mentioned it yesterday about how you're not stressing over having different retention periods in the same box. That by the time you're done in 7 years, it's going to be done. It's going to be it's going to be a draft. And you had I meant to write down the phrase you used. You said
you make every reasonable effort to do things the best you can. unless we were willing to go off site and literally open every box and say, this can be destroyed, this can't, that just seems like a waste of time when next year you're going to go and that same stuff that you pulled out, you're going to destroy next year. Especially if you're in the same boat that we are, where we've had several different efforts at trying to destroy, but before we had an IG policy, which now has teeth, thankfully, due to all of the regulations around privacy. That's a big push that the lawyers actually really do understand, is if we have it and someone else gets a hold of it, that's a problem, right? So they finally understand in a different way. It's not just the risk of being discovered, but it's the risk of government agencies coming in and finding you for even having it. And especially since there's so much data electronically. A little bit bigger of a struggle is making them understand that paper records and electronic records are all records. And we don't take the time to really look at what's information versus what's a record versus what's whatever. To me, information is information. If it's stored in the DMS, it's all a record. If it's stored on a shared network drive, it's all a record. If it's in your email, it's all a record. It's just, no one is going to take the time to literally go in and say, this email's a record, this email's not. If you ask people to do that, they're not going to do it. And then you're not going to get anywhere. So it's better to sort of take a broader sweeping approach there, because if your end goal is to retain what's important, you can do that and get rid of the fluff. It'll get gone, whether it's a record or not, right? You're still going to want to get rid of it.
Great advice. Okay. Again, okay, we just had a question come in. Now that many businesses have improved how their records are stored and tracked, what solutions have you implemented to streamline client contact during disposition once records have fulfilled their retention periods? Have you had success improving this with other clients, and how was it achieved?
So I can take a little bit of that, but I think it's mainly directed to you. But
Okay.
what we are doing is implementing a solution that we originally got it because we wanted to track the disposition of electronic records. If you're using a DMS, you know that natively there's not a lot of, like, if you delete something, it's just gone. And as a records person, that sort of is like, oh my gosh, they can't possibly be right. You need to keep track of the fact that you had it and that you destroyed it and authorized it to be destroyed. But part of that implementation also allows us a workflow for matter closing, and what we would, as well as tracking if a client requires notification prior to destruction. What we're going to be implementing is a matter closure notification to the clients. At that point, you can take your stuff. Otherwise, during the course of business, typically whatever years from now, we will destroy it without further notice. And that's their opportunity up front to let us know, so that we won't have to, at disposition, unless it's required in an OCG, reach out to the client again. That's how we're going to handle it. I don't know what else you've seen with your other clients.
Well, I tell you, some do have that requirement in their policy, and just like notifying attorneys before, or getting permission from an attorney.
We don't get permission.
Right.
We know we're going to notify them and say, this is what's happening. You have X number of days to tell us, oh my goodness, that's a problem. And if not, we're just going to move forward.
Exactly. Okay. So
otherwise you'll never get anything done.
Exactly right. And so when we're starting fresh with a firm, or starting the policy or revamping the policy or whatever, that's the position we want to be in. That we'll notify you, but we're not going to ask permission, because you'll never get it. And the same thing with the clients. Let's nip it in the engagement letter. Okay. But if you try to go back after the fact, after 10 years, a lot of these clients aren't even around anymore, or they merge with someone else or whatever, and the people you dealt with are no longer there. So we really recommend, let's try to get that done up front. And is it easier to ask for forgiveness than permission?
Something like that.
So
and as long as you have buy-in from your GC, one of the things we did is we got our practice group heads together in a meeting and discussed the implications of the destruction of things and why we were going to do it. And we actually got their buy-in, and they had a couple of suggestions. Can we do this and that to sort of carve out like exemplar documents and things like that? So we're working on a process for that. But if you have buying at the top level, at least conceptually, it makes it easier to do those things because they're like, "Oh, well, of course that's what we should do. So just let us know when you're doing it." Because really, do they really want to look over the list to give you approval? They really don't want to. So you're also giving them a way to keep their finger on the pulse, but not have to spend a lot of time.
Okay. Okay. Hey, time flies when you're having fun. Let's get to me what I think is the most interesting part of these projects, and that's the scanning of your file room. Okay. We came in, expected situation. Firm already had some proposals. We went back and revamped the proposals. And to say there was a big difference in the pricing, okay, would be a vast understatement. So if you're looking at a scanning operation, make sure you do get competitive pricing. So the firm selected the service provider, came on site, and they originally had 4 people or
We started with 3.
three.
And as the time went by, the beginning, it was a little bit slow going. It sort of took time to get our processes streamlined. I mean, these are companies, they just hire labor, right? And so it took us a couple months in the beginning, myself and the records manager were like, it's going to take us 6 years to scan all the files in our file room. But as we worked through the workflow, we added some equipment. We reconfigured the way the room was set up, and we added a 4th person to the team, and that really ramped up the scanning process itself. We, of course, complicated it a little bit because we actually asked them to put the documents back in the files and ban them and keep them because we were scanning, but we didn't have the next step, which was disposition. So that did add a little bit of time. But once they got going, I was actually surprised that they finished when they did. It was a pleasant surprise that they finished as quickly as they did. That's a relative term, right?
Well, let's
It
talk about it.
it was about 16 months from start to finish, and they scanned 4.5 million pieces of paper.
4.5 million sheets of paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, QC'd.
Yes.
Okay.
So for us, we are very fortunate that in our records management system, thanks to our excellent our records supervisor, documents are filed within an insert, and then they are indexed according to that, right? So every document goes in an insert. There's the title of the document. So if you look in a Redweld, it's not just closing documents, it's loan agreement, UCC financing statements, landlord's waiver, whatever it is, they're all tracked individually. So we already had a database where we could pull the information for scanning. So we printed out the slip sheets from the records management system for the files as they were in the file room. And as they pull them out, they could then take the slip sheet, put it on top once they prep the content of an insert, and it would pull the document name from the RMS because there was a barcode on there. It would pull the client, the matter, and it could fill all that out and put that into the profile in the document management system. We used AccuRoute for our workflow for the automation of the scanning. And once the documents were saved, the last step it did is it would query the DMS and then pull the document number out and put it in a staging table. And our RMS would go and query that staging table, and then using that same record locator number, put the document number in the field in the records management system, which would allow our end users to actually click on it, and it would take them to the DMS and open up the content. So the two were tied together. So wherever you were looking for that content, you could get to it.
Everyone got that? Okay.
Yeah,
It,
from A to B to Q.
it'd be okay. Again, 16 months, 4.5 million pages scanned. Okay, it comes out to, when we did the math yesterday, about 275,000 scans per month. So they were working. And let's talk about going from 3 people to 4 people. And again, part of what Mattern's role was to measure the productivity. And what happened when we added that 4th person?
So we increased our workforce by 1/3, and we probably increased productivity by between 40 and 45%. because a big part of it was the prepping, right? That it takes you much longer to prep than it does because you got, anyone knows you got to pull everything out. It's just kind of a pain. And then again, because we asked them to put stuff back, we didn't ask them to restaple or anything, like just to put the paper back in the inserts. And then we bound the files so that we were able to maintain the integrity of what had been scanned. So if we didn't want people to be able to, we did close our file room as well. But we didn't want someone to pull a file out and either take something out or put it in, because then what was the point of scanning it?
Yeah, you would ruin the integrity of that.
Correct.
Okay. So that just, I tell you, just really quickly, because we're running out of time here, is that whole idea of banding the documents to ensure the integrity.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
So that went really well. We did that because, again, our executive sponsor at the time had gotten to the approval for the scanning, but not for disposition afterwards. And so that was our sort of stopgap. It's like, if we're not going to destroy it, then we need to make sure that it remains intact. And if anybody needed to put something into a file that had already been scanned, we actually made them create a new file, which seems, if you have a high volume, like a lot, but we really don't. And so it really wasn't that egregious. And then either the legal assistants can keep that file in their space. If it's an active file, they want to continue to put stuff in there. But once they're done with it and they send it back to the file room, we will now scan in-house. We will scan it and bind it, and then it will go into the file room.
And again, this coffee break is setbacks and successes, and you lost your executive sponsor towards the end of the scanning. And that whole disposition thing was supposed to be decided, and obviously that's pending. So,
yes. So we're working through that internally, what we can come up with a recommendation for the best way to move forward with that, because obviously we can't bring anything from offsite if we don't have space to store it here on site.
Right. Okay, and that's going to become an issue over the next couple of years. Yep, absolutely. Okay, I always ask, what was your any regrets, anything you would do differently? And you mentioned about pulling active files.
A couple things. One is because our file was a mix of active and inactive files, which I'm sure a lot of people had, especially with COVID and the lockdown and some other things that happened here, is a lot of active files wound up going back to the file room sooner than they would have in prior existence. What probably would have been a good idea would have been to pull the legal assistants, and like, any active files that you have, we're going to send them back to you so that they're not in the file room. That way you can continue to put stuff in, take stuff out, no impact, and we'll scan everything else. Also, and it wasn't a big percentage, but there was a small percentage of stuff in the file room that had reached retention. We probably would pull that out and then not have scanned it. And the third thing that we probably could have done better was, as we were prepping, and it might have made the project take longer, is anything that we thought that once we were done, we wouldn't want to destroy. So right now we're not comfortable with destroying things with a wet ink signature. Anything with an original seal, anything that's oversized that we didn't want to spend the money to send offsite to scan, is pulling those inserts out and creating new folders that would go somewhere else, so that we would know when we were done, if they were abandoned and scanned, that could all be destroyed, and what was left is what we couldn't. But hindsight is 2020, and so we're just sort of working through that now, how to make that work.
Okay. Well, I know a good consultant if you need one. So, okay. So where's the firm going from here? Other than the items you mentioned, especially in regards to electronic files.
The next steps will really be to start dispositioning electronic files out of our DMS. Emails, surprisingly, doesn't seem to be as big of a hurdle as actual documents that you created for a specific transaction or matter. Mostly because we all know, they're like, oh, well, there was that deal I did 20 years ago, and there was this special thing here. Or in a different practice group, we see a lot of trends in our area of law, and maybe it's cyclical. Every 10, 15 years, there's an uptick in some particular item. We'd like to go back and see the documents we created during that last cycle to know how we protected our clients in that particular environment. So we're working out a way to carve out exemplar documents for each matter. that will go into our KM workspace and our DMS, so that they're not part of the electronic client matter file anymore. And we also created a document type for vital records, which is sort of your CYA stuff, anything that protects the firm that you don't want to get rid of, which is engagement letters, conflicts checks, waivers of conflict waivers, disengagement letters, requests to destroy, anything like that. You want to save those. So we just carved out a different document type. Of course, a lot of that stuff isn't categorized, so we're going to have to go through that as we get there. But we're looking at some data auto classification tools that can help us with that as well.
Okay. Okay, we got about 3 minutes left. Any closing words of wisdom that you want to share? And you're kind enough to share your contact information, that if anyone has any questions or issues after this, they can reach out to you. Okay.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
any closing words of wisdom?
You just got to start somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and being a member of ARMA or even ILTA resources, if you belong to ILTA, talking to your peers, if you have the opportunity to go to a conference, information governance is very much a topic at all the conferences now.
Absolutely.
And they tie it very much into things that resonate with the attorneys. I mentioned, the privacy thing, that you've got HIPAA and CPP, whatever the California one is, it's got so many different initials, and GDPR. Those are the things, and the potential for breaches. Those are the things that lawyers understand differently than the vague, well, maybe if this happens, we might have to produce it. So something that's more concrete.
Okay. I always like to say that every firm, or there's two things sure in life. Every firm has issues and opportunities with their IG and with their offsite record storage contracts. So, again, part of the reason why we're doing today's topic and bringing Chris on is to show you that, hey, it never goes the way you think. There's hurdles you're going to have to jump that you never thought of before. And there's nothing to be ashamed about. Every firm has issues in these two areas. Okay. Okay. If anybody has a question for me or wants to set up a time to discuss IG, I tell you, just send a chat and we'll set up a time to talk. Again, Chris's information's here. Chris has been more than willing to talk to anyone, so I deeply appreciate that, Chris. And that will do it. That's going to be a wrap. So, Chris, thank you very much. Very
Thanks for having
informative.
me.